Hey guys, welcome to another live stream. Let me know if this audio is working. Let me see if I can just get a chat box going up here somewhere. Still trying to get used to all this live streaming software that's going on. And for some reason I can't see the chat. So I can't see if you guys can hear me at the moment. Aha, I found it. Cool, it's working. Very good. Doug, Jeff, Carl, Brent, Jonas, Brett, cheers guys. So obviously you guys are all here for a very highly requested video about how I integrate hydrogen alpha narrowband data into my panoramas. And I think the first thing that probably should be said is it's not absolutely necessary. I know that sounds strange, and if it's not necessary, why am I doing it? But if we just look at some images, so this image here, there's no narrowband data there at all. That's just a H alpha modified camera. This image here, no narrowband data at all. It's just all from the Astro modified camera, and you can still see that there's a lot of detail there, which is really, really cool. And this one again, this is no narrowband data, just hydrogen alpha modified camera. And what I would say is it's not necessary, but if you don't have border one skies and really, really dark, clear skies, then you won't get results like that. So the other thing to say is to get images like that without using any sort of narrowband data, you need to push the image a fair bit and just stretch it and stretch it and stretch it and do a lot of manipulation in post-processing to try and get all that hydrogen alpha to come out. And unless you've got really clean data and some decent exposure time, stretching it a lot just sort of brings out all the noise. So that's where hydrogen alpha narrowband comes in to play, because you don't have to edit the image or stretch the image so much to try and get all that faint hydrogen alpha detail out. You can just do sort of a normal edit and then put in the hydrogen alpha where you want it. So with that said, what I'll do is show you my screen somewhere. And what I'm going to do is jump into Photoshop. And this is what you would normally see straight out of the camera. So if you've got a hydrogen alpha narrowband filter and you put it in your camera and take some exposures, this is what you will see. And it's very unimpressive, which is it's very strange when you do it for the first time, that you see the back of your camera and it's not that impressive. So this one was 60 seconds, ISO 5000 at f1.4. So there's a fair bit of exposure time there, been 60 seconds in f1.4 and ISO 5000. But if you zoom in, it's still really, really noisy and grainy. And that's because you're filtering out all the light except for the hydrogen alpha light. So the signal to noise ratio is really, really poor. And this is what you've got to keep in mind when you want to add hydrogen alpha to an image. You actually need to get a fair bit of exposure time on whatever your target is so that you can mask it in and it looks clean, because at the moment it's very, very noisy. As you can see, it's a single exposure like this, in my opinion, wouldn't be any good to add into an image. You would stack a bunch of images together to really, really clean it up and really improve that signal to noise ratio. so that when you blend them into your images, it's actually nice and clean. And when you go to do a mask, you can actually mask it properly, because at the moment, if we go to do a mask, you'll end up masking all this gritty noise. So that's sort of the first thing to keep in mind, is you need a fair bit of exposure time. And I think the second thing to talk about will be how we actually get everything to line up and, integrate it all. And you guys would have seen that for a little while there, I was playing around with a twin camera setup. And the whole reason behind that was so that I would shoot two identical panoramas, one in hydrogen alpha, one in RGB, so that I could overlay the hydrogen alpha one over the RGB, and then they'd be identical, and I could just sort of mask them in, and everything lined up perfectly. But what I learned through that process was that you just waste a lot of time with exposure time in places that don't have hydrogen alpha. So this is obviously the summer Milky Way with Orion and California Nebula and Rosette. And outside this little portion of sky, there's not much hydrogen alpha around it. This is sort of where it's all concentrated. So if you were to shoot a full arch panorama of the Milky Way, so over on the right hand side of the image here, if you moved across towards where the Magellanic Clouds are, you're just wasting time, because in that blank portion of sky there's no hydrogen alpha, so you're actually just wasting exposure time. What you're better off doing is setting up a second tracker, or just going out on a second night and just purely catching hydrogen alpha in the parts that have it. So stack 20 minutes, 30 minutes of data on Orion, opposed to using that 30 minutes to get a full panorama in hydrogen alpha. I hope that makes sense to you guys, and that's a lesson I learned through trial and error. So with just using single images and shooting the full arch in hydrogen alpha, it means that all your data looks like this. It looks really gritty and it's really hard to integrate. So that's why now I just focus on one small section wherever the hydrogen alpha nebulosity is, and I'll just stack a bunch for that portion and then integrate it into the panorama and just line it up. So tired photographers on board. Hey Joel, how you going, man? So yeah, I think we better get into it. So what you will end up with this step is we can just assume that this is a stack. Now, like I said, this is not a stack, but if you stack a bunch of these together, this is what it would look like out of the stacking software. So all we want out of this is the red channel. So this is all the information that we want from this. We only want this, the luminosity essentially. We don't want the actual color of it. So you would just grab the red channel out of it. You can copy it, create a new document, and then you've got exactly what you want. Now I'm going to get rid of this because I'll work on the stacked images. And this is what we're going to be integrating it into. And as you can see, there's actually already a fair bit of hydrogen alpha that you can see. You can clearly see the Horsehead, Orion, Barnard's Loop. Oops, sorry, I'm not sharing my screen. There we go. I'll go back a step. Still trying to get me out around the buttons to click for this live stream. So I'll go back a step. So this is what you'll see when you stack it together. It'll all be red like this, but we don't want this red. We only want the red channel. So you would just grab the red channel and then just create a new document, just paste it in there. And then this is what you would actually work on to integrate this into your panorama or single image or whatever you want. You only want the luminosity out of this. You don't want the actual red color. So this is the image we're actually going to integrate it into, and like I said, it's already got a bunch of detail there, a bunch of nebulosity. It's really, really cool. And yeah, I've just got a question there. If I use a 12 nanometer, will it be more clean than using a 6 or a 3? Yeah, so the tighter the narrowband you use, the better it will be in light polluted areas or when the moon's out. But the downside of that is you're cutting out even more light, so you would need to stack more to get a clean image. So it's sort of a bit of a trade-off there. By using a 12 nanometer, you're letting more light in, but if there's any moon, you don't get as much contrast if the moon's out. So if you used a 6 or a 3, it would be better for shooting when the moon's out. So yeah, we've got a lot of natural detail here in the sky, and like I said at the start, this image here hasn't been pushed that far. So if I wanted to, pull out more of this nebulosity, I would have to really, really stretch it, and the image would essentially start falling apart. So at this point, I would stop stretching and adding contrast and trying to pull more detail out, and just rely on the narrowband data that I got to bring out, or get all that crazy detail. So what I'll do is I'll grab so this is a stack here of the Orion region, the exact same images I just showed, but this is a stack. Now this is 11 images, 60 seconds, ISO 5000 f1.4. So there's a fair bit of light there, and the signal to noise is a lot better. Now this image was stacked in APP, so Astro Pixel Processor, so it's already come out of the stitching software or stacking software as a grayscale image, because when you stack in there, you can actually tell it that it's a hydrogen alpha image, and it will just automatically know that you want it in black and white. So all I'll do to this now is get rid of the stars, because I don't use the stars in my H alpha layers. I just use the nebulosity. And if you don't use the stars, it's a lot more forgiving when you actually go to line things up. And it means you can shoot at f1.4 because you're not worried about stars being, misshapen in the corners or anything like that. So what we can see now is we've got really, really clean data. There's a lot of cool structure there. And that's just from 11 minutes. That's really, really cool. And essentially what we want to do is turn this image into its own mask. We only want the white bits, and we're going to use a blend mode, the screen blend mode. So what we want to do is make all the background sky pure black and all the nebulosity white, so that when we go to blend it in, only the nebulosity areas show through. So the way I do that is a few ways. Camera raw filters a pretty good way to do it. You can add some contrast, and you'll see as I go through this, the background will get darker, and then all the nebulosity will get whiter. So that's the whole idea here, is to try and separate the nebulosity from the background. And clarity normally works pretty well at showing where that fine structure is. Jonas, I've got a question there. New to H alpha, do I have any tips on putting the filter in and out during the night, or do you use two cameras? No, very carefully. That's all I can say. It's an absolute pain. The only cool thing is some cameras, I think it's Canon cameras, they've got that drop-in filter systems, or they're like a little drawer that pulls out. So that's a really cool system that you can actually just slide in a filter and slide it out without actually taking the lens off and having to fiddle around with getting in there and pulling the filter out because it can be an absolute pain. So it already looks a little bit better there. And at this point, what I'll start doing now is just grab a brush, and I'm going to change the mode of the brush to overlay. And then I'm just going to bring the flow down a little bit, maybe about 50%, and I'm going to make it a black brush. And when I paint on this mode, anything that's 50% grey will turn black. And I'm just going to really rough it in at the moment, just to try and get rid of the bulk of this background sky. Hey, Philip from Queensland. Now, the way I do this and the way I've learnt to do this is based on techniques used by Jacob Sainer. So he's got a workflow that's a lot more complicated than this in terms of the software he uses and how he integrates his hydrogen alpha, but it's a lot more scientifically accurate. It lines everything up perfectly. It subtracts the red light that's not actually hydrogen alpha light, using pics inside and some really cool functions in there. But this is the way I'm doing it because it works. This way works well enough for me. It's reasonably straightforward, and for this wide field stuff, you don't have to be super accurate. And you'll see when we go to integrate this what I mean. So I'm just going to switch over now to a white brush, and I'm going to bring the flow right down. And I'm just going to start painting over really gently the nebulosity areas. And all I'm trying to do is separate the whites from the neutral grey colours, so that when I come back with a black brush, the hydrogen alpha bits stay behind and I can get rid of that background sky. And the more time you spend at this point in the workflow, the better it will be for you. If you can get a really good mask. Hey Carl, yeah I do, yeah I use an Astronomic 12 nanometer, yep. It's funny because those filters, yeah, they're not cheap, but essentially they can charge whatever they want because they're really good. And I don't think a lot of people are making clip-ins for Sony cameras, so yeah, essentially they've got the market cornered and they can do whatever they want. So with that white done, I'm going to switch back over to a black brush and just go in now and try and fine-tune the edge of this to get all the edge of it. And just remembering that we're on the overlay mode, so we're only darkening down those 50% grey areas. So that's why we're going to switch back between white and black brush to try and only leave behind the nebulosity. And there may be a better way to do this using levels or curves, or maybe even some sort of like plug-in panel and luminosity masking or something like that. But this is the way I do it at the moment. And like I always say, just because it's the way I do it doesn't necessarily mean it's the only way or the best way. But what I was saying about Jacob there is, if you guys want to learn the really scientific way to get things absolutely spot on, I highly recommend jumping onto his YouTube channel, becoming a Patreon of his, and he's got a lot of videos on his Patreon that go into detail about more advanced techniques and sort of bridging that gap between, you know, Milky Way imaging and deep space imaging, because he's a phenomenal deep sky photographer, and he's bringing all those techniques that those guys use for deep space over into, you know, wide field or nightscape imaging. So it's really cool, but be prepared for a big steep learning curve if you want to go down that route, because it uses a lot of advanced techniques and a lot of different software that's just not Photoshop. And what you may find after watching this video and seeing how I do this is this may not suit you. It may not be something you want to go down the rabbit hole of having to go through all this every time. But there's a couple of little things that will help you, and one will help you put your mind at ease. And one of them is you don't have to shoot hydrogen alpha every time you go out. One really, really cool thing about hydrogen alpha is it never changes. This will be identical whether I shoot it tonight, a year ago, 2 years from now. This image would be absolutely identical. So the really cool thing is, if you spend a couple of nights going out and shooting all different parts of the Milky Way during summer and stacking sections of those, you've then got a library of hydrogen alpha, and then you never have to go back and shoot hydrogen alpha again if you don't want to. If you do choose to, what you can do is just keep stacking, you know, more data every time you go out and get cleaner and cleaner and cleaner images. And the reason I said you're going to want to stack is because, as you can see, the more we go into this, you're going to need to have clean data to try and get a nice clean line to do this masking, so to speak. So if you had really noisy data at the moment, then this would be a really hard process to do, because you would just be trying to separate noise from the background. It's really, really hard. So if you've only got a 2.8 lens, you know, if you were shooting a 2.8, you would need like 40 minutes of data to get this. So I was shooting at 1.4. So this is getting pretty close to what I would call a good mask. And like I said, I would spend a lot of time perfecting this and getting this exactly right. So what I'm going to do is just do the other one, which was the Gum Nebula. Actually, I don't think I will. I think I'll take the stars out of it so you can see it. So who's already turned off by hydrogen alpha narrowband already by seeing this? I'm sure there's got to be a couple. So you can see the gum is really, really faint compared to Orion and that. So you can just see straight out of this stack, it's just already very faint compared to what we see with Orion and Barnard's Loop. So all I do is just go through the exact same process of trying to separate the neutral grey out of the background and the white from the nebulosity to try and get a pure black background, and then white where the nebulosity is. And I'm not going to do it for this, but what I'll do is I'll close these ones down and I'll show you. So this is the Gum Nebula one that's all done, and just for the time sake of it, I've just already done it. So yeah, you can see all the beautiful faint detail there. And this part of the gum down here, it's really, really faint. And this is a good example of, if you don't have enough data there, it's really hard to find where the hydrogen alpha is and try and separate that hydrogen alpha from the background, because if you don't have enough signal there, the hydrogen alpha will just look neutral grey, the background's neutral grey, and it's really hard to see what you're actually trying to mask out. So the more data, the better. And this was the same. This was 11 minutes f1.4, and this is with a 24mm lens. So at this point, we are ready to start integrating this into our image. So I'll just copy it. And then I'll just paste it into our image. And when I do this step, I normally do it when there's no stars in the image. So my normal workflow is do the normal stretching, take the stars out, get all the colors roughly how I want them. I would put the hydrogen alpha in, I would put the stars in, and then essentially the image is finished. So that's roughly how I go about it. But for the sake of this video, it doesn't hurt putting it in now. So one thing you'll see straight away is things aren't actually going to line up very, very well, because we've shot a panorama, and when you shoot a panorama, it warps and twists individual frames to get everything to line up. So this sky was shot with the same lens on the same night. So this hydrogen alpha was actually shot from exactly the same tripod position, same night, same lens, same everything. But you'll see that it won't line up because it's one's a panorama and one's a single image. So you can see that they're not the same. So what we're going to do, we'll just zoom in a little bit. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this layer just so I've got a backup of it. And then I'm just going to free transform this layer to get it where I need it. And it looks like the scale's a bit out, so I'll start out by just changing the scale a little bit. And this is the point where I was saying where if you want it to be absolutely perfectly scientifically identical, where everything lines up perfectly, this is not the method to do it. This is going to get you pretty close, but for me, I just want to make pretty pictures. I'm not interested in making sure that every tiny little bit of data is exactly where it should be, pixel for pixel. So that's not me. I'm just here for beer and pretty pictures. So this is close enough for what I do. Carl's grabbing a tinny. Oh, maybe I should go and grab a tinny. And for those guys that aren't from Australia, a tinny is a beer. So that's looking reasonably close. And what you can see down here at the bottom is Carina, that's over here, should actually be here. So it's a little bit out. And the bottom half of the gum nebula is a little bit out as well. So you can see that the hydrogen alpha narrowband doesn't actually line up with the hydrogen alpha that's in the RGB. So what I'll do at this point is go okay with that, because I think the gum itself is reasonable. Oh, maybe a little bit out, but it's pretty close. And this is what I mean by sort of close enough's good enough for me. So what I'll do at this point is I'll just puppet warp this layer, and I'm just going to drop pins around where I think it's pretty close so that they don't move when I start dragging things around. And then I can just drag on Carina here. I might even put a pin in the middle here so it doesn't move. Then I'm just going to drag Carina in roughly where it should be. And then that's not going to work. So what I'm going to do, if you yank and twist too much, sometimes it doesn't work. So what I'm going to do is just put a mask on that layer, and I'm just going to brush out, change it back to normal. That'll help. So I'm going to brush Carina out, and I might even brush the bottom of the gum nebula out here. And what I actually can do, I can see the line of the background sky, so I'll get rid of that. And the reason I duplicated this layer at the start is just in case this happened when you're trying to, if you're got a huge portion of sky that you're trying to integrate. So this is 24 mil, so it's obviously a huge part of the sky. Sometimes you can't puppet warp or twist or rotate it to get everything to line up, so I'll just do it in 2 steps. So we'll get this one, and with this one, all I'm going to look at is sort of the bottom part, and then Carina as well. So that's Carina lined up pretty well, and I'm going to just do the same thing again, do a free transform, somewhere there looks pretty close. And then I'll put a layer mask on this one. I'll invert it because it'll be easier just to brush in the bottom bit. And essentially there is our integrated hydrogen alpha, just with no color. And all we need to do to put color in is we just add a hue and saturation layer, and we'll click colorize, and we'll just clip that layer to the hydrogen alpha layer, and this is actually doing it to the bottom half. So what you'll see if we turn this on and off is we've added that little bit of hydrogen alpha there, and we can actually use the saturation slider here to add as much color to the hydrogen alpha as we want, or we can change, you know, the lightness of it. And if you go too far, it starts getting out of control. So yeah, you can be really particular about how much you want to add in and the look that you really want to go for. So I'll do the same thing with the main part of the gum nebula, colorize it, clip it down to the layer itself, and then play with the saturation and the lightness to get a look that you want. You can see you can actually fine tune it a fair bit. So sometimes less is more. And straight away, if I turn this on and off, this layer, you can see how much we've just added in. So it's an extremely powerful thing to do to get all that beautiful nebulosity in there. And what I'll say at this point is what you can see, we've only added in the red channel where the hydrogen alpha is. There's a few videos getting around talking about how to integrate hydrogen alpha into images, and what they do is actually put the whole image into the red channel. So I think Astro Backyard, Trevor Jones, I think he's got one out there. Starscaper, he's got one out there. Astro HBF, he's got one out there. And they're all really, really good tutorials, but the problem with doing that method is that if you add the whole hydrogen alpha image and not mask it out to only be the nebulosity, is your color balance goes way off. So you lose all that beautiful natural color of the night sky. So all the natural air glow just goes away, and it looks more like a deep space style image. So that's why this way is a lot better way to get a natural looking sky, or maintain a natural looking sky while also bringing in hydrogen alpha. So what I'm going to do is this one here. So this is the mask that I created for Orion. So you can see all that beautiful detail there. And when you look at this mask, you can see that it's not actually pure white and pure black. There are those areas that are grey, and it's really important to keep those areas that are grey, sort of those transitional areas that aren't really, really hard edged, because it makes it blend in a lot better, and it also looks a lot more natural than having hard edges. So we'll do the same thing with this one. We'll bring this one in, we'll change it to screen, and we'll just move it into place. And as you can see, it doesn't line up very well. I mean, over here, here's the California Nebula up here, and here's where it actually is down here. So, yeah, because it's single image versus stitched panorama, it's pretty funky. So what I'll probably do is do another layer, just so we can do the different portions in two separate layers. But this is a good time to show you guys that if you want to add more hydrogen alpha, you can just duplicate the layer, and you can see there you're just doubling up on how much is actually there. And you can get pretty out of control, and I've been guilty of this. When I first started trying to add H alpha in, it's so exciting that you just add so much in there, and it gets out of control. It looks pretty fake, and I look back at images only that I took a year ago trying to add H alpha in, and I just cringe when I look at them. So we'll do the same thing again. We'll free transform, and the scale's a little bit out. And when I'm lining this up, I'm looking at like important things. So a very important thing here will be the horse head and then Orion. So if I line the horse head up right here in the middle of the frame, I'm just looking at what that's doing to Orion, and it's not right, and neither is Barnard's loop. So it's telling me that the scale's still a little bit out. Still a little bit out. It's getting pretty close there. So something like that will be close. And then I'll go through the same step as before. I'm going to do a puppet warp on this layer, and I'm going to just put a pin on the horse head, pin on Orion. And some of this doesn't look like it's lined up very well. I'm probably just going to drag some of this nebulosity out so it lines up directly over the top of Barnard's loop. You can see a bit poking out there. It's pretty close. This one's pretty good. And anywhere that you want to keep exactly where you want it, you want to put a pin on there, because if I go to move this rosette nebula over a little bit, you can see that it's yanking on the rest of it. So we'll get that one lined up. And this side of the image is crazy warped. So this nebulosity here needs to go way over here. So I don't think I'm going to worry about it in on this layer. I think I'm going to do a different one. And I think this one's got to go over a little bit. But I think that's pretty close. So I'm just going to put a mask on this one. I'm just going to get rid of that and that. I'll just get rid of this that's on that. Being very crude here. What I might even do while I'm here is just get rid of a little bit of that glow that's around some of this nebulosity, so that when I colorize it, I don't have to do it later. I'll just get rid of it now. So that's pretty close, I think. And there may be small differences, but like I said, it's the way I do it is not science. It's just making pretty pictures. So it's not lined up perfectly. But I think it's close. And I think for the purposes of this, it'll be absolutely fine. So that's that layer done. Now all I'll do is turn on this layer, and all I'm looking at for this layer is the California Nebula and this nebula here, which I'm not sure the name of that one, but I'd love that if someone in the comments knows, let me know. So who out there has already got a filter and is trying to figure out how to integrate it, and who is just wondering if they should dip the toe in? I'd be very interested to know. So this layer, I'm only looking at this nebulosity down here, and I think that's pretty close. Everything lines up pretty well. But what I'm seeing is over here, these two here don't line up. And to be honest with you, I don't even know that I'm that worried about it because it's so small. So what I'm going to do is throw a layer mask. Flaming star, seagull nebulas, flaming star. Well, there you go. Maybe I should take a bit of a deeper look at that. I'm sure Joel can hook us up with a telescope to look a bit deeper at it. So with this layer mask, I'm just going to brush out the rest of this nebulosity that I don't want, that doesn't line up. And now we've got this full area of Orion, all the H alpha in there. Late arrival, Richard Taddy, welcome. You're here for the good bit, the pretty bit. All the hard work's done, mate, so just grab a coffee and enjoy it. So with the nebulosity all put back in, it's time to just colorize it again. So the hue saturation layer, colorize it, clip it to the bottom layer, and then, so this is the layer that's got Barnard's loop on it, so we can add saturation as much as you want. You can go crazy. And then some lightness just to figure out how much, once again, if you go too much, you can see everything, but somewhere there looks okay. And then we'll colorize the bottom one with hue and saturation. We'll clip it down to that layer, and this one's just for the California Nebula and the newly identified flaming star. Yeah, this will go up on the channel later. Yep. Oh, Bailey Farley's in the house. You've missed all the good bits. So this is sort of where we're at now, and if I click these layers on and off, so the nebulosity on this layer is these bottom two. Beautiful. Next one down, the whole of Orion, which is really, really cool. And then if we go over to this side, that's the bottom of the Gum Nebula and Carina, and then the Gum Nebula itself. So the really cool thing about integrating hydrogen alpha this way is I've now got all these layers here that I've got full control over and do essentially whatever I want with them. So you might look at this and say it looks a bit unnatural, which is fair enough. And you can just simply reduce the opacity of that layer. Or if you go into the hue and saturation on each one of these layers, you can just bring the lightness down So this is Orion and Barnard's loop. You can just dial it in to bring it back as much as you want to bring it back. So you've got full control. And this is the thing I love about this method of integrating hydrogen alpha is you've got control over it, where if you, like I touched on before, just grab a whole hydrogen alpha frame, throw it in the red channel, you can't do this. So this maintains all the natural sky colors and also gives you full control over everything. And then from this point, I would then tweak the actual colors of the hydrogen alpha itself. And I would simply do that by doing a selective color layer. And then, is it in the magentas? No. So you can just change the color of the hydrogen alpha to get it to whatever you think it should look like. Like I said, I'm not into making it absolutely perfect. I'm into making it pretty. So not that that was a big change, but I changed the color of it a little bit. But that's essentially it. That's the way I integrate it, and it works really well at this stage. Like I said before, if you want to get a lot more scientific with it and have everything line up perfectly down to the absolute pixel, I highly recommend checking out Jacob Sainar's work. Reach out to him, jump on his Patreon, and as long as you're prepared to go down that rabbit hole of using deep space software, PixInsight, if that's what you want to do, then I highly recommend checking his work out. But yeah, that's pretty much it. And from this point, with this integrated, I would then just create a stamped layer, and I'm ready to keep editing. So from here, I'll just do, little other fine tuning things. Maybe add a bit of vignette to it. And that's probably about it. Tweak the colors a bit more, and just the regular things that you would normally do. But is there any other questions while we're all here? I know a lot of you guys that have turned up recently missed a lot of those steps, but this is the hydrogen alpha detail. And that's that. So yeah, like I sort of touched on before, the biggest benefits of doing it this way for me are not having to use twin cameras like I was. So that's a big help. And you can just dedicate a couple of nights of the year to go and shoot hydrogen alpha of only those important bits that have hydrogen alpha in it. Because with this image, you can see that if I'd shot a big section in here in the middle of hydrogen alpha, it's just a waste of time because there's actually nothing there. So I focused all my time on getting this panel in hydrogen alpha and then this panel in hydrogen alpha. So 20 minutes worth, or 22 minutes, 11 minutes each. And with that data there, if I didn't want to, I wouldn't have to use go and shoot hydrogen alpha for the rest of the summer. I could use this exact same data for the whole rest of the summer because the sky is going to be the same the whole time. And it doesn't matter if it's a panorama or single images, I can use this data again. So what I'll probably do is anything that's shot at 24 millimeters, I'll reuse this data, and then I'll go and get a catalog that's at 40 millimeters. And I've already been working on a catalog of 105 millimeters, so just sort of get that, that bank of hydrogen alpha, and it's sort of, you put the hard work in now, and then it'll pay off over the next couple of seasons because you don't have to keep getting data every night. Matej, yeah, glad you got something out of it, mate. Ali, my pleasure. Carl. Yeah, man, the gum nebula is huge, and it's so big that even at 24 millimeters, you can see how big it is in a 24 mil lens. It's huge. So it in itself makes for a really good nightscape without anything else in it. So if you can line up the gum nebula behind something cool, that in itself can be a really, really cool image. So what filter have you used in your camera for the HHF? It's a Astronomic 12 nanometer clip-in filter. Sorry guys, I'm just trying to catch up with this chat. Yeah, Bailey, yeah man. I'm lazy too, and that's why I've gone to this method of doing it. Because it's adding HA data in, it's work intensive. It doesn't matter how you do it, but I think over the last couple of months, this is sort of the most streamlined way I found of doing it, of just getting a bank of narrowband data and then integrating it this way manually is sort of the most streamlined way, believe it or not, because the other ways of doing it, you need to be very, very proficient at other software like PixInsight and Astro Pixel Processor. And Astro Pixel Processor in itself can take literally days to process and register hydrogen alpha files to RGB. Ask me how I know. What's the link for Jacob? Saner, yeah, so like Louis said, Saner, S-A-H-N-E-R, and Jacob, J-A-K-O-B. Yeah, so jump on his website or YouTube, Instagram. He's got all those things. His work's phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. Jonas, cheers, mate. I'll just wait a minute, see if there's any more questions rolling through as my internet is lagging behind. Yeah, Bailey. Yeah, it's a clip-in filter. Yep. So it's a 12 nanometer clip-in filter, and I've probably got it in my bag somewhere at the moment. I'll so tiny little filter. That's it. So you just push it in, and it sits right in front of the sensor, and then your camera lens actually just holds it in. And like I said before, they're bloody expensive, but what's not expensive? Oh, it's disappointing, Bailey. Haven't touched your camera for 6 or 8 weeks. Brent, my pleasure, mate. Yeah, if you enjoy this live stream stuff, let me know. It's a really good way. Instead of just doing a normal tutorial video, I feel that I can help you guys by answering comments live, jumping into discussions about things. So yeah, Joel. So yeah, I touched on that at the start of the video. So Joel's saying about using the draw system that Canon has, and I haven't actually looked into how I would be able to do that using a Sony camera and Sony lenses, but I believe Benjamin is actually using Canon lenses or some different lens, and he's got a draw system, so you can just slide in a narrowband filter. It's like a little adapter that's got a draw, so instead of actually taking your lens off and dropping a filter in against your sensor, it's just a little draw that you actually put a hydrogen alpha filter in or light pollution filter or anything like that. So yeah, that's a genius thing they've done there, and I can't believe that Sony let Canon get one up on them there. Yeah, Joel. Okay, so you would have to use Canon lenses. Cool. Rightio. Well, if there's no more questions coming through, I might jump off. Brett, yeah, man. Brett, the Gum Nebula gets overlooked. I must point, yeah, it's worth looking at because it's such a phenomenal part of the night sky. That Gum Nebula, that whole region is is yeah, like I said, it's overlooked because a lot of people don't have modified cameras. So when you point your camera in that direction without a modified camera, you just don't see it. And even with a modified camera, it's so faint that you either need a lot of exposure time on it, or you really, really need to stretch that data out to try and to see it all. But it's absolutely huge, and it's so pretty to look at. It's awesome. And I guess one other thing I should say is the way I've done this by manually lining up the hydrogen alpha layer with the RGB layer. For me, excuse me, sorry. For me, I'm lucky that I shoot in dark skies and I can actually see yeah, so I'm actually lucky that I can see all of Barnard's Loop. I can see all the nebulosity so that when I go to line it up, I can actually line it up essentially perfectly. Same with the Gum Nebula. I can see it well enough in my RGB data that I can actually line it up really, really well. If you were shooting in a really light polluted area, you may not actually see the Gum Nebula, or you may not see much of Barnard's Loop. So the only downside to using this method of manually lining things up would be if you're in heavily light polluted areas and you can't physically see where to put the nebulosity. I can see how that would become an issue. So it's something that I haven't really ran into. I'm lucky that everywhere I've shot, it's been well dark enough that I can see all the nebulosity in my RGB files, that I can line everything up perfectly. So I know some of you guys are in crazy light polluted areas, so that could be an issue. But I'd be interested to hear if you've run into that issue, how you deal with it. Not that I plan, not that I plan to go anywhere that light polluted, but I think it could help everybody out. Yeah, Carl. Yeah, so Trevor gets some really good detail, a lot of hydrogen alpha detail just from a modified camera, including the gum region. And I think he's just using a red intensifier filter on the front of his camera to try and help, saturate or make those reds pop a bit more. But yeah, you're right. He gets some beautiful images, including the gum. Righto, that'll be it. I'll close this down, and I hope it's helped. And yeah, I hope it's helped, and not scared you off too much from doing hydrogen alpha. And like I said at the start, this is just the way I'm doing it at the moment, and it may change at some point. But like I said, it may not be the best way. It's definitely not the only way. It's just the way I'm currently doing it. So I'll just keep doing it like this. And if things change in the future, I may do another one of these. And if you guys have got a better way of doing this, any part of this, whether it be the masking of the hydrogen alpha narrowband data itself, using luminosity masks or curves or levels or whatever, let me know, and it should help everybody out. So yeah, rightio. I'll leave it at that, and I'll see you guys in the next live stream, whenever that may be. So, cheers, guys.